The alarm bells rang across the human colony on Tau Ceti Prime. Children screamed as their parents grabbed them and ran toward the underground shelters. The sky above turned dark with enemy ships that looked like giant metal insects. The Hivari had come to destroy another human world. David Reynolds received the emergency message while eating breakfast on his flagship. The coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. His crew rushed to battle stations as the news spread through the ship's communication system. The Hivari attack was massive and coordinated. 3 human colonies were already under assault. The UES Retribution was humanity's newest and largest warship. It carried advanced weapons and shields that Earth's engineers had spent decades perfecting. But even this powerful vessel seemed small compared to the alien fleets that made up the Galactic Confederation. Humanity had joined the Confederation 37 years ago. As the youngest and weakest member species, Reynolds walked quickly through the corridors of his ship. His crew moved with practiced efficiency around him. They knew that war was coming. The Hivari were not members of the Confederation. They were raiders and killers who attacked peaceful worlds. The Confederation had been fighting them for over a century. The communication screen in the command center flickered to life. Admiral Keffer of the Thalorian Empire appeared on the display. His gray skin and 6 eyes made him look intimidating even through the video link. The Thalorians were the most powerful military force in the Confederation. Their empire controlled dozens of star systems and commanded over 100 warships. Human commander, Keffer's voice was deep and harsh. Your species will join the combined fleet to stop this Hivari invasion. We gather at the nexus point in 48 hours. Reynolds nodded respectfully. We'll be there, Admiral. How many ships should we bring? All of them, Keffer replied. This attack is larger than anything we've seen before. The Hivari must be stopped before they reach the core worlds. The transmission ended abruptly. Reynolds turned to his second-in-command, Patricia Webb. She was studying the tactical displays that showed the human fleet's current positions. 47 ships was not much compared to the alien fleets, but each human vessel was tough and well-trained. What do you think, Patricia? Reynolds asked. Webb frowned at the data. The Hivari have never attacked 3 colonies at once. Something's different about this assault. They're usually more careful about picking their targets. Reynolds agreed. The Hivari were brutal but not stupid. They typically attacked isolated outposts or weakly defended worlds. Going after 3 well-protected colonies seemed desperate or part of a larger plan. The human fleet began moving toward the nexus point. Other Confederation ships were already gathering there. The Korth Collective sent their bioships that looked like giant sea creatures floating through space. The Nexari brought their crystal vessels that could channel pure energy into devastating weapons. 6 other species contributed their own, unique technologies to the combined fleet. When the human ships arrived at the nexus point, Reynolds was amazed by the size of the assembled force. Over 300 vessels from 12 different species floated in formation. The Thalorian ships dominated the center of the fleet with their massive gun batteries. The Korth bioships formed a living wall on the left flank. The Nexari crystal ships sparkled like diamonds on the right. The human fleet was assigned to the rear guard. Reynolds protested this decision during the command meeting. The gathering took place on the Thalorian flagship, a massive vessel that could carry an entire human city. Representatives from each species sat around a holographic display showing the battle plan. Admiral Keffer, Reynolds said carefully, human ships are fast and well-armed. We could be more useful in the front lines. The Thalorian admiral's 6 eyes focused on Reynolds with what might have been amusement. Your species has been in space for less than a century. Leave the real fighting to those with experience. Overseer Bryn of the Korth Collective made a wet breathing sound that passed for laughter among his species. Perhaps the humans could carry supplies instead. Their ships are too small for serious combat. The other alien representatives nodded in agreement. Reynolds felt his anger rising but kept his voice calm. We've proven ourselves in previous battles. The Hivari raid on Kepler Station was stopped by human forces. Yes, Keffer replied, but that was a minor skirmish. This is real warfare. Stay in the rear and protect the supply ships. That's where you'll be most useful. Reynolds had no choice but to agree. The human fleet took position behind the main battle line. Their job was to guard the supply vessels and provide covering fire for any retreating ships. It was not a glorious assignment, but it was important work. The combined fleet began its journey toward the HFY stronghold. The enemy had built a fortress in an asteroid field near the edge of Confederation space. Intelligence reports suggested that thousands of HFY warriors were waiting there with their own fleet of attack ships. During the 3-day journey, Reynolds noticed something odd. The Thalorian and Korth commanders were sending encrypted messages to each other. These communications were coded in a way that excluded the human fleet. When Reynolds asked about it, he was told that the messages contained sensitive tactical information that required special security clearance. Webb also reported strange readings from the alien ships. Their weapon systems were running continuous diagnostics. Their shields were being tested at regular intervals. The bioships were secreting unusual chemicals that interfered with human sensors. They're preparing for something, Webb told Reynolds privately. But I don't think it's the HFY they're getting ready to fight. Reynolds shared her concern. The alien fleets were acting like they expected trouble from within their own ranks. The excessive security measures and constant weapon checks suggested that someone was planning something beyond the official mission. The night before the battle, Reynolds stood in his quarters looking out at the stars. The HFY fortress was still 2 hours away, but he could already sense the tension building throughout the fleet. His instincts told him that something was very wrong with this mission. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Webb entered with a datapad in her hands. Her face was pale and worried. "Sir, I've been analyzing the communication patterns," she said quietly. "The Thalorians and Korth aren't just talking to each other. They're coordinating with the Nexari, too. And there's something else." Reynolds took the datapad and studied the information. The patterns were subtle, but clear once you knew what to look for. The 3 largest alien fleets were working together in secret. Their messages were too frequent and too complex to be simple tactical updates. "How long has this been going on?" Reynolds asked. "At least 6 months," Webb replied. "Maybe longer. They've been planning something big, and they've been very careful to keep us out of it." Reynolds felt a chill run down his spine. The human fleet was surrounded by hundreds of alien ships. They were alone and far from home. If the other Confederation species had decided that humanity was a threat, this would be the perfect opportunity to eliminate them. The battle was scheduled to begin in 8 hours. Reynolds had to decide whether to trust his allies or prepare for the worst. The choice would determine whether humanity survived or joined the countless species that had vanished from the galaxy without a trace. The first explosion lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. The Thalorian heavy cruiser had fired its main plasma cannon at the HFY fortress, sending a stream of superheated gas across the void. The blast struck the asteroid base and carved a glowing crater in its surface. The battle for the HFY stronghold had begun. 300 Confederation ships moved in coordinated waves toward the enemy position. The Korth bioships released clouds of living projectiles that swarmed through space like angry hornets. The Nexari crystal vessels charged their energy weapons until they blazed with pure white light. From their position at the rear of the fleet, the human ships watched the assault unfold. Reynolds stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, studying the tactical displays. The battle seemed to be going according to plan. The HFY were responding with fierce resistance, but the Confederation forces were slowly overwhelming their defenses. "Sir, I'm detecting launch signatures from the fortress," Webb reported. "The HFY are sending out their fighter swarms." Reynolds nodded and watched as thousands of small enemy craft poured from hidden bays in the asteroid. The HFY fighters looked like mechanical insects with razor-sharp wings and glowing green eyes. They moved in perfect formation, responding to commands from their Queen Mind commanders. The first wave of fighters crashed into the Thalorian battle line. Plasma cannons fired in all directions as the heavy cruisers tried to swat down the swarming attackers. Several Hivari craft broke through the defensive fire and struck their targets with suicide attacks. 2 Thalorian ships suffered heavy damage, but continued fighting. The Korth bioships responded by releasing their own defensive organisms. These creatures looked like jellyfish made of living metal. They spread through space and formed a protective barrier around the organic vessels. When Hivari fighters touched the barrier, they were dissolved by powerful acids. The Nexari ships began their main assault. Beams of pure energy lanced out from their crystal arrays and struck the fortress with devastating power. Entire sections of the asteroid base were vaporized in seconds. The Hivari responded by firing back with their own energy weapons, but their technology was no match for Nexari crystals. Reynolds felt confident that the battle would end in victory. The Confederation fleet was larger and better equipped than the Hivari forces. The enemy was putting up a brave fight, but they were clearly outmatched. Then he noticed something strange. The Thalorian ships were changing position. Instead of pressing their attack on the fortress, they were moving to form a new formation. The adjustment seemed tactical at first, but Reynolds realized they were slowly surrounding the human fleet. Patricia, are you seeing this? The Korth ships are shifting too. They're not advancing on the fortress anymore. Reynolds felt his stomach tighten. The alien fleets were repositioning themselves around the human ships while maintaining their attack on the Hivari. The movement was subtle enough that it could be mistaken for normal battle maneuvers. The communication channels were filled with tactical chatter between the alien commanders. Most of it was encrypted, but Reynolds could hear the excitement in their voices. They were coordinating something big, and the human fleet was not included in their plans. "Sir, I'm detecting weapon locks," Webb reported urgently. "The Thalorian ships are targeting us." Reynolds stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The red targeting indicators were shifting away from the Hivari fortress and focusing on human vessels. The Korth bioships were moving closer to the human formation while their weapon ports opened. "This can't be right," Reynolds said. "Check the readings again." Webb worked frantically at her controls. "The signatures are confirmed. Multiple alien ships are preparing to fire on us. The Nexari vessels are charging their energy weapons in our direction." The horrible truth became clear. The battle with the Hivari was a cover for something much worse. The Confederation species had lured the human fleet into a trap. They intended to destroy humanity's ships while they were far from home and unable to call for help. Reynolds opened an emergency channel to Admiral Kethver. "Thalorian flagship, this is the UES Retribution. We're detecting weapon locks from your vessels. Please explain." The response came after a long pause. Kethver's voice was cold and formal. "Human Commander, the Confederation Council has reached a decision. Your species represents a threat to galactic stability. You will be eliminated before you can endanger civilized worlds." The words hit Reynolds like a physical blow. The alien species had been planning this genocide for months, possibly years. The Hivari attack was probably arranged to provide the perfect excuse for mobilizing all human ships in one location. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Reynolds," he broadcast on the emergency frequency. "We are under attack by Confederation forces, battle stations immediately. This is not a drill." The response was swift. Human ships throughout the fleet began powering their weapons and raising their shields. The crews had trained for this possibility, though none of them had believed it would actually happen. The first salvo came from the Thalorian heavy cruisers. Plasma cannons that had been firing at the Hivari fortress suddenly turned and unleashed their fury on human ships. The destroyer UES Vigilant took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. The cruiser UES Defiance suffered massive damage to its engine section. The Korth bioships launched their living projectiles at the human formation. These creatures were designed to penetrate ship hulls and eat their way through the interior. The frigate UES Courage was overwhelmed by the organic assault and went silent within minutes. The Nexari energy beams sliced through human shields like knives through paper. The precise strikes disabled engines and weapon systems, leaving the targeted ships helpless. The cruiser used Valiant drifted dead in space after a crystal beam cut through its power core. Reynolds watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. 12 human ships were destroyed in the first few minutes of the attack. The remaining vessels fought desperately, but they were outnumbered 10-1. "Sir, we need to retreat," Webb urged. "We can't fight the entire Confederation fleet." Reynolds knew she was right, but there was nowhere to run. The alien ships had positioned themselves to cut off all escape routes. The human fleet was trapped in a kill zone with no chance of survival. The UES Retribution shuddered as Thalorian plasma bolts struck its hull. The ship's armor held, but Reynolds could feel the vessel's pain through the deck vibrations. His crew worked frantically to keep the weapons operational and the shields powered. Captain Torres of the UES Vengeance made a desperate decision. Her ship was already dying from multiple hits, so she aimed it at the nearest Korth bioship and fired her. Engines at full power? The collision destroyed both vessels in a spectacular explosion that lit up the battlefield. The sacrifice bought time for other human ships to regroup, but it could not change the outcome. The alien fleets were systematically destroying every human vessel. The Thalorians focused on the larger cruisers while the Korth targeted the destroyers and frigates. The Nexari provided precise strikes to disable any ship that tried to escape. "We're losing too many ships," Webb reported. "Hull? Breaches on decks 7-12. The port engine is offline." Reynolds looked at the tactical display. Only 15 human ships remained operational. The rest were either destroyed or drifting helplessly in space. The Confederation forces were moving in for the final kill. The alien commanders were taking their time now, savoring their victory. They had waited years for this moment, and they intended to enjoy it. The betrayal was complete. Humanity had trusted their allies and been led like sheep to slaughter, but Reynolds was not ready to give up. The human fleet might be doomed, but Earth still had a chance if someone could escape to warn them. He began planning a desperate breakout attempt that might save a few ships. The battle was far from over. The aliens had won the first round, but they had underestimated human determination. The real war was just beginning, and humanity would not go quietly into the darkness. The universe exploded into chaos. Every human ship in the fleet was suddenly fighting for its life against enemies they had trusted for decades. The Thalorian plasma cannons that had been aimed at the Hivari fortress now turned their deadly fire on human vessels. The Korth bioships released waves of living acid that ate through human hull plating like cancer. The UES Retribution rocked violently as energy beams from Nexari crystal ships sliced through its shields. Sparks flew from control panels as the ship's systems struggled to absorb the massive damage. Reynolds gripped his command chair as the deck tilted beneath his feet. "Report," he shouted over the alarms. Webb's voice was tight with stress. "Direct hit to the starboard engine. We're losing power to the weapon systems. 3 more human ships just went dark." Reynolds looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The human fleet was being systematically destroyed. The UES Warrior exploded in a brilliant flash as Thalorian plasma tore through its reactor core. The UES Guardian listed helplessly as Korth acid creatures dissolved its hull from the inside out. This was not a battle. It was an execution. The communication system crackled to life. Admiral Keffer's voice filled the bridge with cold satisfaction. "Did you really think we would allow your species to threaten the galaxy? Humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable. You expand too quickly and ask too many questions." Reynolds activated the emergency broadcast system. "This is Admiral Reynolds. To all human vessels. We are under attack by Confederation forces. They have betrayed us. Fight back with everything you have." The response was immediate. Human ships throughout the fleet began returning fire. The destroyer UES Lightning launched a full spread of nuclear missiles at a Thalorian cruiser. The frigate UES Storm opened up with its particle beam cannons on a cluster of Korth bio-ships. But the human weapons barely scratched the alien vessels. The Confederation fleets had stronger shields and heavier armor. They also had the advantage of numbers. 300 alien ships surrounded 47 human vessels in a killing circle. "They planned this perfectly," Webb said grimly. "The Hivari attack was just bait to get us here." Reynolds realized the full scope of the betrayal. The alien species had been working together for months to arrange this genocide. The Confederation Council had voted to eliminate humanity while pretending to welcome them as allies. Every meeting, every shared meal, every diplomatic exchange had been a lie. The U's defiance made a desperate charge toward the Nexari formation. Captain Blake knew his ship was doomed, so he decided to take as many enemies with him as possible. The human cruiser fired everything it had while flying straight into the crystal ships, the Nexari. Energy beams cut the UES Defiance apart piece by piece. The ship's hull glowed white-hot as the alien weapons vaporized its armor. But Blake kept flying forward even as his vessel disintegrated around him. The burning wreckage of his ship crashed into a Nexari crystal ship and destroyed both vessels in a spectacular explosion. The sacrifice inspired other human crews to fight harder. The UES Vengeance launched a spread of antimatter torpedoes that punched through Korth Bio ship defenses. The UES Courage used its ramming prow to tear a hole in a Thalorian cruiser's hull before being destroyed by return fire, but Courage alone could not overcome impossible odds. The human fleet was being picked apart ship by ship. The aliens were in no hurry. They had waited years for this moment, and they intended to savor their victory. "Sir, we're down to 7 operational ships," Webb reported. "The others are either destroyed or too damaged to fight." Reynolds felt rage building inside him. The Confederation species had murdered thousands of human crew members. They had betrayed every principle of honor and trust. They had proven that they were no better than the raiders and pirates they claimed to oppose. Overseer Bryn of the Korth Collective opened a communication channel. His wet breathing filled the bridge as he spoke. "Your species should have remained on your primitive world. The galaxy belongs to civilized races, not barbarians who solve problems with violence." The hypocrisy was staggering. The aliens were committing genocide while lecturing humans about violence. They were destroying an entire species while claiming to represent civilization. "You want to see barbarians?" Reynolds snarled into the communicator. "You haven't seen anything yet?" The remaining human ships regrouped around the UES Retribution. The survivors included the cruiser US Nemesis, the destroyers US Falcon and US Eagle, and 3 frigates. They formed a tight defensive formation and prepared to sell their lives dearly. The Thalorian fleet moved in for the final attack. Their plasma cannons charged with deadly energy while their targeting systems locked onto the human vessels. The Korth Bio ships released clouds of acid creatures that swarmed toward the human formation. But then something unexpected happened. The Hivari fortress, which had been silent during the betrayal, suddenly came alive. Launch bays opened across the asteroid base and disgorged hundreds of insectoid fighters, but these ships were not attacking the Confederation fleet. They were attacking the human ships. Reynolds was confused until he realized the truth. The Hivari had been monitoring the entire battle. They had watched the Confederation species betray their human allies, and they had decided to intervene. A new voice crackled over the communication system. It was mechanical and buzzing, translated from the Hivari language by computer. "Human warriors, we have observed your betrayal. We will not allow the extinction of a species that showed us honor in battle." The Hivari fighters slammed into the Confederation fleet with suicidal fury. The insectoid pilots rammed their ships into Thalorian cruisers and Korth Bio ships. They swarmed over the Nexari crystal vessels like angry wasps. The alien commanders were caught completely off guard. They had expected the Hivari to either flee or continue fighting the humans. They had not anticipated that the insectoid species would switch sides in the middle of the battle. The Hivari assault disrupted the Confederation attack formation. Thalorian ships turned their weapons away from the humans to deal with the new threat. Korth Bio ships recalled their acid creatures to defend themselves. The Nexari crystal ships began firing in all directions. Reynolds saw his chance. "All human ships, follow me. We're getting out of here." The 7 surviving human vessels broke formation and began fighting their way toward the edge of the battlefield. The Hivari fighters provided cover, sacrificing themselves to protect the human ships. The insectoid warriors showed no fear of death as they threw themselves at the alien fleet, the UES. Retribution's engines roared to life as the ship accelerated away from the killing ground. Thalorian plasma bolts flashed past the bridge windows, but the human crew kept flying. They had to escape. They had to warn Earth about the betrayal. Behind them, the battle raged on. The Confederation fleet was larger and better armed, but the Hivari fought with desperate courage. The insectoid species knew they were doomed, but they were determined to give the humans a chance to escape. The last thing Reynolds saw was a Hivari fighter ramming itself into Admiral Kethvar's flagship. The explosion tore through the Thalorian vessel's hull and sent it spinning into the void. The alien commander who had orchestrated the betrayal was finally paying the price for his treachery. The human ships jumped to hyperspace, just as the Confederation fleet regrouped. 7 vessels had escaped from the trap that was meant to kill them all. They carried with them the evidence of the greatest betrayal in galactic history. The journey home would take months. But when they arrived, humanity would be ready for war. The darkness of hyperspace provided no comfort. 7 human ships drifted through the void between stars, their crews haunted by the memories of watching their comrades die. The UES Retribution led the small formation, its hull scarred by alien weapons, and its crew pushed to the breaking point. Reynolds had not slept in 3 days. He paced the bridge like a caged animal, studying damage reports and casualty lists. 40 ships had been destroyed in the betrayal. Over 12,000 human crew members were dead. The Confederation had committed genocide and called it justice. "Sir, we have a problem," Webb announced from her station. "The hyperspace engines are failing. We're losing containment in the port nacelle." Reynolds stopped pacing and looked at the engineering displays. The alien weapons had caused more damage than initially reported. The UES Retribution's hyperspace drive was slowly tearing itself apart. The other surviving ships were in similar condition. "How long do we have?" Reynolds asked. 6 hours, maybe 8, Webb replied. "After that, we'll be stranded in normal space." The news hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. They were still weeks away from human space. Without hyperspace engines, they would never reach Earth. The Confederation fleet would hunt them down and finish what they had started. Captain Blake of the UES Nemesis appeared on the communication screen. His face was grim and his uniform was torn. "Admiral, we're having the same problems." The enemy weapons were designed to cause cascading failures. They wanted to make sure none of us escaped. Reynolds felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. The 7 surviving ships carried the only evidence of the Confederation's betrayal. If they died here, humanity would never know what really happened. Earth would trust the aliens right up until the moment they attacked. Options? Reynolds asked his senior staff. Webb consulted her tactical computer. "We could try to repair the engines, but we don't have the right components." The alien weapons fused the containment coils. The chief engineer, Commander Harris, shook his head. "Even if we had the parts, the repairs would take weeks. We'd be sitting ducks if the Confederation fleet catches up." Reynolds looked at the star charts. They were in an empty region of space, far from any inhabited systems. There were no friendly ports where they could seek shelter. The nearest human outpost was still 10 days away at maximum speed. "There is one option," Blake said quietly. "We could send a message drone. If we program it with all our data about the betrayal, it might reach Earth before the Confederation attacks." Reynolds considered the idea. Message drones were small and fast, but they had limited range. A drone would need to make multiple jumps to reach human space. The chances of it arriving safely were slim. "Do it," Reynolds ordered. "Prepare all the evidence we have. Communication logs, weapon signatures, battle recordings. Everything." The crew worked frantically to compile the data. They included personal messages from the survivors, testimony about the betrayal, and tactical information about Confederation forces. The message drone would carry humanity's final warning. As the drone prepared to launch, Reynolds recorded his own message. "This is Admiral David Reynolds of the UES Retribution. The Confederation has betrayed us. They lured our fleet into a trap and murdered our crews. Do not trust them. They plan to destroy humanity. Prepare for war. The message drone launched from the UES Retribution and disappeared into hyperspace. Reynolds watched it go with mixed emotions. The small device carried humanity's last hope, but it also represented his failure as a commander. Hours passed as the human ships drifted through space. The hyperspace engines continued to deteriorate. One by one, the other vessels reported critical failures. The UES Falcon was the first to lose power completely. The UZ Eagle followed an hour later. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures," Webb announced, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Reynolds felt his blood turn to ice. The Confederation fleet had found them. Dozens of alien ships materialized around the human formation. Thalorian cruisers, Korth bioships, and Nexari crystal vessels surrounded the 7 damaged human vessels. Admiral Kethvar's voice filled the bridge. "Human Commander, your escape has ended. Surrender now and we will grant you a quick death." Reynolds looked at his crew. They were exhausted and demoralized, but they still had fight left in them. The human spirit was not easily broken, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "All human ships, this is Admiral Reynolds," he broadcast. "We will not surrender. We will not beg for mercy. We will fight until the last ship is destroyed." The response was immediate. Every human vessel powered up its weapons and raised its shields. The crews prepared for one final battle. They knew they would die, but they would die fighting. The Confederation fleet moved in slowly, savoring their victory. They had chased the human survivors across the galaxy. Now they would finish the job they had started, but as the alien ships closed in, something unexpected happened. The space around the human formation began to shimmer. New contacts appeared on the sensors. The Hivari had followed them. A fleet of insectoid ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately attacked the Confederation forces. The Hivari had pursued the alien fleet across the galaxy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They had chosen to side with humanity against their former enemies. The alien commanders were shocked by the sudden appearance of the Hivari fleet. They had thought the insectoid species was destroyed in the previous battle. But the Hivari were survivors, and they had come to honor their debt to humanity. The battle erupted with explosive violence. Hivari fighters swarmed over the Confederation ships like angry insects. The insectoid pilots fought with suicidal courage, ramming their vessels into enemy targets. They showed no mercy to the species that had betrayed their new allies. Reynolds seized the opportunity. "All human ships attack the Thalorian formation. Make every shot count." The 7 human vessels unleashed everything they had. Nuclear missiles, particle beams, and plasma cannons fired in coordinated volleys. The concentrated firepower overwhelmed the Thalorian shields and tore through their hull plating. The UES Nemesis scored a direct hit on a Thalorian cruiser's reactor core. The explosion sent a chain reaction through the alien formation. 3 more ships were destroyed in the blast, and several others were severely damaged. The Korth bioships tried to retreat, but the Hivari fighters pursued them relentlessly. The insectoid warriors showed no fear as they dove into clouds of acid creatures. They sacrificed themselves to protect the human ships. The Nexari crystal vessels began charging their main weapons. The energy buildup was massive, enough to destroy all the human ships at once. But the Hivari Queen ship suddenly appeared and rammed the crystal formation. The collision destroyed both vessels in a spectacular explosion. The tide of battle had turned. The Confederation fleet was in chaos, their formations broken by the unexpected Hivari assault. The alien commanders had not prepared for a 2-front war. Reynolds realized this was humanity's chance. The Hivari had given them a gift beyond price. They had shown that not all alien species were enemies. Some understood the value of honor and loyalty. "This is for every human who died in your betrayal," Reynolds said as the UES Retribution fired its final salvo. The battle raged through the night. When it was over, the Confederation fleet was shattered. The surviving alien ships fled into hyperspace, leaving their dead behind. The Hivari had proven that betrayal came with a price. but the victory was bittersweet. The human ships were still damaged and far from home. The journey back to Earth would be long and dangerous. The real war was just beginning. As the human fleet prepared to continue their journey, Reynolds received a message from the HFY Queen ship. The mechanical voice was filled with respect and determination. "Human warriors, we have chosen our side. The galaxy will know that the HFY stand with humanity. Your enemies are our enemies. Your fight is our fight." The alliance was forged in blood and fire. Together, humanity and the HFY would face whatever came next. The Confederation had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the power of honor and the bonds forged in battle. The journey home had become a race against time. Earth needed to know about the betrayal before the Confederation could strike again. The survival of humanity depended on 7 damaged ships and their alien allies. The real war was about to begin. The message drone reached Earth 3 days before the surviving human fleet. The small device carried the most important data in human history. The evidence of betrayal spread through the colonies like wildfire. Within hours, every human world knew that their alien allies had tried to commit genocide. The response was immediate and terrifying. Peaceful colonies transformed into armed camps overnight. Research stations became weapons laboratories. Civilian factories began producing military equipment. The human species had been pushed beyond their breaking point, and now they would show the galaxy what true fury looked like. Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as his damaged fleet approached Earth. The familiar blue world looked different now. Orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet like a steel web. Thousands of new ships filled the space around the moon. Humanity had mobilized for total war. Admiral Patricia Hayes met Reynolds at the orbital command station. She had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Forces after the betrayal. Her face was hard as stone and her eyes burned with cold anger. 7 ships, she said quietly, out of 47. The aliens killed over 12,000 of our people. Reynolds nodded grimly. The Thalorians, Korth, and Nexari planned this. For months, the HFY saved us. Without them, none of us would have survived. Hayes studied the tactical reports from the battle. The evidence was overwhelming. The Confederation had committed the worst act of treachery in galactic history. They had murdered innocent humans while pretending to be allies. "The colonies are demanding action," Hayes said. "The Parliament has authorized unlimited military production. Every human world is contributing to the war effort." Reynolds looked at the production reports flowing across the command screens. The numbers were staggering. Every human colony had converted its industries to military purposes. Mining worlds were producing armor plating and weapon components. Agricultural planets were manufacturing ammunition and supplies. The research colonies were developing new technologies specifically designed to counter alien defenses. "How long until we're ready?" Reynolds asked. 6 months for the first wave," Hayes replied. "We're building 300 ships using everything we learned from the betrayal. The new vessels have redundant systems, hardened communications, and weapons designed to penetrate Thalorian shields." The human shipyards worked around the clock. Engineers who had once designed colony transports now created instruments of war. The UES Nemesis became the template for a new class of heavy cruiser. The UES Retribution's battle damage was studied. To improve armor designs, the HFY provided crucial intelligence about Confederation fleet movements. The insectoid species had become humanity's first true ally. Their ships patrolled the border regions, watching for alien scout vessels. They shared their knowledge of enemy tactics and weaknesses. Reynolds was given command of the new First Fleet. His flagship was the UES Vengeance, a massive dreadnought that incorporated every lesson learned from the betrayal. The ship carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Its crew was handpicked from the survivors of the original battle. The other human fleets were equally impressive. The Second Fleet specialized in fast attack vessels designed to hunt down enemy scouts. The Third Fleet consisted of heavy bombardment ships built to destroy orbital installations. Each formation had a specific role in the coming war. When the human fleets were finally ready, they moved with coordinated precision. The first fleet targeted the Thalorian home system. The second fleet attacked Korth colonies. The third fleet struck at Nexari crystal mines. The alien species would learn that betrayal carried a terrible price. The battle for the Thalorian homeworld was swift and brutal. Reynolds led his fleet into the system with overwhelming force. The alien defenders were expecting a revenge attack. But they were not prepared for the scale of human fury. The UEE's vengeance opened fire with its main batteries. The new human weapons tore through Thalorian shields like paper. The plasma cannons that had once seemed invincible were useless against human technology. The alien fleet was destroyed in less than 4 hours. Admiral Kethver tried to negotiate a surrender, but Reynolds refused to answer his communications. The Thalorian commander who had orchestrated the betrayal would receive no mercy. His flagship was the last to die, torn apart by concentrated human fire. The attacks on Korth and Nexari territories were equally devastating. Human fleets struck with surgical precision, targeting military installations and government centers. The organic ships of the Korth Collective dissolved under human acid weapons. The crystal vessels of the Nexari Union shattered when struck by sonic disruptors. The other Confederation species watched in horror as their strongest members were systematically destroyed. The humans fought with a cold efficiency that terrified their enemies. There was no mercy, no negotiation, no quarter given. Within 1 year, the Thalorian Empire ceased to exist. The Korth Collective was reduced to scattered refugee fleets. The Nexari Union became a footnote in galactic history. The 3 species that had planned humanity's extinction were themselves extinct. The surviving Confederation members sent desperate diplomatic messages to Earth. They claimed they had known nothing about the betrayal. They offered tribute, territory, and unconditional surrender. But humanity's response was always the same: silence. Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UES, Vengeance, as it patrolled the former Thalorian space. Human colonies were already being established on alien worlds. The species that had called humans primitive barbarians were being replaced by the very people they had tried to destroy. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Republic," Webb reported. "They're requesting a peace conference." Reynolds considered the message. The Zephyrians had been neutral during the betrayal, but they had also done nothing to stop it. They had watched while their allies committed genocide and said nothing. "No response," Reynolds said finally. "Let them wonder." The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity. The species that had seemed weak and naive had proven to be the most dangerous of all. They had shown mercy when treated with respect, but they had shown no forgiveness when betrayed. The Hivari remained humanity's only trusted allies. The insectoid species was given territory in former Confederation space. They became the guardians of human expansion, watching for threats and ensuring that no new betrayals could be planned. Years passed, and human civilization spread across hundreds of worlds. The shipyards that had built weapons of war now constructed exploration vessels and colony ships. But the military fleets remained ready, patrolling the borders and reminding the galaxy of humanity's power. Reynolds eventually retired to a quiet world on the frontier. He spent his final years writing the official history of the betrayal and the war that followed. His account became required reading in human schools, a reminder that trust must be earned, and that betrayal would never be forgotten. The last entry in his memoir was simple: "The galaxy thought we were weak because we showed mercy. They mistook our restraint for inability. They learned the difference between humanity at peace and humanity at war. We gave them one chance to coexist as equals. They chose genocide instead. The consequences were their own responsibility." The galaxy was at peace now, but it was a peace enforced by human strength. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now spoke of them in whispers. They told stories of the fleet that had been betrayed and the terrible vengeance that followed. Children of alien species learned to fear the humans, but they also learned to respect them. The galaxy understood now that humanity could be the greatest of allies or the most implacable of enemies. The choice was always theirs to make. The age of naive trust was over. The galaxy would know peace, but it would be a peace guaranteed by human memory and enforced by human will. The betrayal that was meant to eliminate humanity had instead forged them into something far more dangerous than their enemies had ever imagined. Humanity had claimed their rightful place among the stars, and they would never again allow themselves to be led like sheep to slaughter. The galaxy belonged to those strong enough to hold it, and humanity had proven they were the strongest of all.